Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Good evening. I'm storyteller Otis Jiry, and I ain't your grandfather. From where I'm from, we don't do bedtime stories. And if that's what you were expecting, you're in the wrong place. If it's terrifying tales you're after, well then, I've got just the thing. Get comfortable, settle in, turn off the lights, if you dare. Your night is about to get a whole lot darker. Who needs sleep anyway?
Good evening! You're listening to Scary Stories Told in the Dark. Welcome to Season 8, Episode 14. I'm your host, Otis Jiry, and in this episode, I'll be performing 3 tales to terrify you, courtesy of author Jackson Barnard, about devilish documentaries, lunatic labyrinths, and evil experiments. You're listening to the standard edition of tonight's program, which contains 2 spine-tingling stories. If you'd like to show your support and enjoy an extended version of this and other episodes with twice the terror, visit simplyscarypodcast.com and click Patrons in the upper menu to sign up today. Thank you for your support. Now, it's time to take a walk together down the moonlit trail. So, lock your doors, turn your lights down low, and settle in. The show is about to begin. Our first tale from Jackson Barnard regards a university student who isn't all that taken with his newest professor, who he views as a little too easygoing for his liking. So when the opportunity comes to pirate a documentary for class viewing instead of pay, he thinks he's pulled a fast one. But maybe he's the one about to be taken for a ride. Without further ado, I present to you Red Earth. There were only a few select things in the world that Corbin Reef hated more than lazy college professors. Give me a hard-ass who'll break you down before midterms, he would say. At least that would show they cared about the class. Corbin was a first-year environmental studies major at Lasich College. His choice of study was merely elementary, being the son of an alternative energy engineer father and a marine biologist mother, both of whom were heavy hippies in the late Vietnam War era. His first semester in uni was going along well enough. He packed his schedule with GE credits and one prerequisite class for his major, Intro to Environmental Studies. Corbin didn't much care for the other courses. They were all easy B's at worst. What he wanted to devote most of his time to was the intro class. However, he didn't do enough research into the class or who was running it because, as he soon found out in his first week, he was stuck with Professor Slugworth, the laziest tenured professor on campus, for the next 17 weeks. Professor Slugworth didn't hate his job. Rather, he was an animal biologist and didn't find much enjoyment outside of his field. He would rather spend time on his research papers or writing his new book than teach a class full of students who didn't want to be there. Weeks passed, and while Corbin's other classes were gearing up for the first wave of midterms, Slugworth's class was chugging along at an excruciatingly tedious pace. Corbin woke up one morning to an email sent to his student account. It was from Slugworth. Its subject was, "Class Cancelled," and it simply said, "Class is cancelled today. Watch the documentary Barren Earth, and we'll have a discussion tomorrow." Even his emails were lazy. There was no salutation at the end, no links to the assignment, nothing to help him out. He found a discussion on the online board where his classmates were just as confused. He learned that the documentary was available on several streaming platforms, but it cost money. There was speculation that Slugworth chose this specific documentary because he was earning incentives for making his students buy the movie. Corbin decided he was going to spite his good-for-nothing professor and get the movie for free. He texted his friend Ramy, a computer science major, and said, "I've got a favor." "Good morning to you too, dickhead," Ramy responded almost immediately. Corbin ignored his friend's jab. "I need you to download a movie for me." "What kind of movie we talking about?" "A nature documentary. Get your head out of the gutter. You want it downloaded legally or the other option, Einstein?" "Hey, I don't want my FBI agent to catch on to my antics." "Why can't you do it?" "Because I'll catch a virus or something if I try." "Here's a tip. Don't be stupid. Pretty simple if you ask me." Corbin groaned on the inside. He was running late for his 9 o'clock calculus class, so I had to seal the deal fast. "Come on, man, throw me a bone, why don't you?" "What's in it for me?" "You know that hot chick in our English 1A class? The brunette with the huge cans? That's the one." "What about her?" "I've got her number." Corbin waited for Ramy's response. At this rate, he was going to end up late, but attendance wasn't mandatory for his first class. The 3 dots popped up, vanished, then popped up again like a skittish weasel. "Don't lie to me, man," he said. "I'd never lie to you," Corbin responded. "And I'll send it to you if you get me the movie." "Deadass?" "Deadass." "How'd you even get it?" "Prof asked us to get contact information from different classmates. I already knew you, so I tried swinging for the fences." "And it worked?" "You think I'd let a pretty face like mine go to waste?" "Don't get cocky, kid," Ramy texted. "But you got yourself a deal." Corbin breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. He slipped his phone in his pocket, snatched his bag, threw on some shoes, and grabbed a protein bar on his way out of the dorms. It was well past 7, and night had fallen, fast and hard, like a flashlight lowered into a deep cavern. Corbin had spent his time after class on campus looking for part-time jobs, catching up from midterms, and spending an hour with his study group. He returned to his single-occupancy dorm room and booted his laptop. Ramy had sent an email with an MP4 attachment. The subject said, "A deal's a deal, now send them digits." The body said, "Took me a while to find it. It's safe to download. I tried it myself. -R." Even if Ramy tested it himself, Corbin didn't want to take a chance with his new laptop he got as a graduation gift. He ran a virus detection scan on the file, and it came up clean. He clicked the attachment and saved it to his desktop, where he opened it up in a video player. Before pressing play, he grabbed a bag of corn chips, his hydro flask full of vitamin water, and leaned back in his seat. The documentary opened with a sweeping landscape of a wide ocean, stretching off far past the horizon and chasing low-hanging clouds. The camera floated above the world, then took a nosedive into the deep blue waters where schools of fish and vast coral reefs dotted the ocean floor like ants on a polka-dotted picnic blanket. A voice picked up suddenly, narrating the fantastic views as the camera swam along with the sea life. "There's a world that's been out of reach until now. Two worlds lie on either side of a crystalline barrier, thinner than a sheet of paper. Sweeping orchestrals accompany several tight nature shots. Fish swam in the ocean, birds flew through the dry air. A frog sat idly on a lonesome lily pad. The narration continued. One world is older, beautiful, and sophisticated. The other lies above the waters, a younger world that is secretive, tougher, different. Little in these two sister worlds is as it appears. This is a story of consummation between the land and the sea, where miracles and devastation lie around every facet of life. We first start our journey into the briny depths of the sea, where life as we know it stood witness to a grand display of evolution. The camera panned up and out, flying past the stratosphere high above the earth, where nothing but deep blue water circled the globe, save for two disks of white in the ice caps. Millions of years ago, the earth was blue, a barren landscape on the surface, but underneath it was teeming with life. Pockets of green began to sprout out of the blue expanse like bobbing apples. Then, slowly, the sea levels died down, bit by bit, the narrator said, and a new world was introduced, one with brilliant new colors and sights to behold. Land. Corbin thought the CGI was incredibly well done. They showed the starting formation of Pangaea and the continents that would break off from their mother supercontinent. The narrator went on. Over the next few epochs of time, creatures followed an unseen destiny to this new world, guided only by their instincts. But only a tiny portion made their land their home, while the vast majority of life decided to stick to their roots, so to speak. Thus, the planet was split in half, with one world thriving on dry land and the other prospering in the sea. Both worlds collide and clash, and their past relationships, as well as their present, are part of this story. The camera swung around the earth in a wide arc, and with the sun and stars spiraling in all directions. Then it got closer and soon fell into orbit, flying low through the puffy white clouds, and finally skimming above the ocean once more. A thin line of beige lined the horizon, and the camera came to a beach. We see here, the narrator continued, the bridge between worlds, the coastline. And underneath the very tips of the surface are the edges of land fringed with coral that disappear into the depths. Corbin saw great fingers of cyan laced with veins of deep teal coral. Majestic music played in the background. The reef is a jeweled city perched on the clifftop. It's a community with amazing relationships between animals. There was a gathering of bright yellow fish with black spotted gills, surrounded by several smaller thin blackfishes. 15 centimeters slippery dicks. The narrator continued. Corbin chuckled to himself. Groom large moon wrasses, even combing the tender gills. They eat any parasites and dead skin, a reward for their trouble. The camera switched to a discolored yellow fish, evidently one of the moon wrasses. Its skin was covered in sores, and its gills were inflamed with red. This sickly fellow is being tended to by a myriad of dicks. Corbin stifled a laugh, even though it wasn't as funny anymore. They are trying to find the root of the problem. Signs of infection are eminent on this poor moonwrasse, and it won't be long until it succumbs to its disease. One of the dicks violently thrashes at a spot around the wrasse's face, then pulls a plump insectile thing from the skin. Ah, here we are. A lucky dick has found the parasite, hidden just above the eyeball. It's a large specimen by the looks of it. The slippery dick relishes in its hard work and leaves the wrasse be, and the others follow suit soon after. The camera panned out to find large, ominous shadows taking the place of those minuscule, slippery dicks. Unfortunately for the moonwrasse, the lucky discovery was too little, too late, and several predators take this opportunity to feast on a hearty meal. Just before the mysterious sea creatures lunged for the kill, the scene changed. It showed a handsome brown eel hiding in a patch of coral. The narrator took charge. The African moray eel, the 5.5-meter dragon of the reef, is attended by shrimps. They enter the jaws of death to keep razor-sharp teeth clean in exchange for any morsels they find. No opportunity is wasted, however desperate it may seem. The eel opened its mouth wide and snapped its jaws in excitement, catching one of the shrimps in its maw. The scene changed again. Devilfish hide in an anemone, protected by tentacles that would paralyze other bigger, more dangerous fish. Corbin watched as tiny, beautiful fish, with hues of blue and deep orange, hid in the bulbous sea plants. An anemone can close, said the narrator, and the local clownfish is finding his home a tight squeeze. The camera panned over to a larger anemone. Unlike the previous ones, this plant had blue skin on the outside and barbed tentacles. The narrator explained the situation. The faux anemone, Actineria imponere, is a carnivorous sea plant that looks and acts like a regular sea anemone. It attracts smaller fish to its vessel, letting them live and thrive in their tentacle-like teeth. And when a bigger fish imposes itself on the smaller fish and decides to move in, the anemone makes its move. A clownfish nudged several devilfish out of the anemone and tries to settle in, only for the opening to close suddenly, and the fish disappears. It snatches the unsuspecting bully and closes its mouth, digesting its food. Corbin saw as the anemone made quick work of the clownfish, and whatever else was unlucky enough to get caught, alongside its primary victim. A fine layer of what looked like sand got kicked up underneath the anemone. The narrator continued. It releases waste particles around its body that are rich in iron, phosphate, and nitrogen, letting sea vegetation grow around it and inviting other species of fish to set up shop, ignorant of the terrifying predator lurking in plain sight. Indeed, relationships like these can have difficult moments. The scene changed. The camera flew past a white-grained sandy beach to a jungle of sorts. These underwater communities, the narrator said, lie along the shores of ancient human settlements where the cradle of modern mathematics, medicine, science, and technology were nurtured. We now journey to the world of land, where we come across a wide and boundless forest in the heart of what was known as Asia. Over half of all the world's trees, evergreen and deciduous, stand in these great assemblies. For many of us, they are places of mystery and darkness. They are key to our climate and home to countless unique species. Quick consecutive shots of burning trees, barren land, and displaced animals filled the screen while the narration picked back up. In the past, we have destroyed them without hesitation. Yet forests do have an astounding ability to recover. The camera switched to a scenic landscape shot, where mountains of white-tinged trees roll toward frigid waters. Take, for example, this luscious location, the southern edge of the boreal forest, the forest that has held dominion over the far north for thousands of years. But there was once a time when its long reign was threatened by flooding and mass extinction following a great calamity. It has since found a resurgence of both life and balance. An aerial shot at sunset with tendrils of dying light stretching over thin tree trunks that look like hairs on a snow-white head. It stretches eastwards across a great continent for thousands of kilometers, and now, in the middle of a harsh winter, where young lakes and rivers are freshly frozen over, it's largely silent, seemingly empty of animals of any kind. But this is the home of an animal so rare, it's almost mythical. Like games? Of course you do. The best games keep us sharp and observant, training us to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in our friends and enemies alike. Every hour 2 lion cubs spend tussling and playing is an hour less making the kill that feeds the pride. And sometimes they can be fun too, if that's your thing, which brings me to tonight's sponsor, Wooga. Wooga represents a standard of excellence in hidden object mastery games. Whether you're looking to challenge yourself and sharpen your powers of observation, or less likely you're just looking to have a bit of fun, if that's your thing, then you need to try June's Journey, Wooga's hidden object murder mystery game, the ultimate test of your powers of observation that's free to download. As plucky amateur sleuth, June investigates the murder of her sister by her sister's husband. June's Journey will test not just your powers of observation, but your reaction time as well, as you scan various locations for clues, picking up bonuses along the way for the quick-witted and keen-eyed. June's Journey provides endless hours of enjoyment, no matter where you are, as long as you have an internet connection. So you can challenge yourself whenever and watch those scores climb higher. I'd like to knock out a few rooms between recording sessions, or whilst reviewing audio, as it keeps me on my toes and sharpens my attention to detail. It also is just a straight-up good time, providing hours of entertainment you won't want to miss. So go for it. Awaken your inner detective and join the 30 million fans across the globe in uncovering the secrets of June's Journey. So do yourself a solid and download June's Journey free today on the Apple Store or Google Play. Soft violins play as the camera switches to the ground. Snowy rocks surround loosely green-leaf trees. The picture is still. Then a bright orange head arises behind a bluff, shouldering a massive feline body behind it over freshly fallen snow. The Siberian tiger, the narrator explains. There are fewer than 300 of them in the wild. These are the most intimate pictures of them in the wild that we have imagined. Corbin could hear the tiger panting heavily. Warm puffs of air sprouted from its mouth and mingled with the trees. A crow caught in the distance, and the tiger growled up at it. Up close, Corbin could see its definitive black stripes and white undertones near its belly. The narrator went on. A male Siberian tiger patrols a territory of nearly 800 square kilometers, and it has to do so if it is to find enough prey to keep itself alive during the long winter. Ancient instinct compels it to search in a wider berth, approximately 2,000 square kilometers, but lake shores and ocean water impose as obstacles upon its quest. This is an impoverished land where food of any kind is scarce. A quick aerial shot followed by a bird perched on the ground. The camera showed it pecking at a bundle of ants. A pine cone, said the narrator. Pine nuts provide vital energy during the winter months. Corbin watched as something big and furry sauntered between bare bushes and thick trunks. The bird flew away. Wild boar depend on these nuts. For them, it has to be grab and go, for they themselves are food for a tiger. The boar scampered away as the tiger got near, and the camera showed the big cat slowly following after it. This game of hide-and-seek is played out over vast areas of forest, as all animals search for the life-giving stands of pine. A closer aerial shot where the camera tracked the tiger as it stalked its prey. Sudden changes to their habitat, as well as the introduction of a new, more ferocious predator, have made the Siberian tiger nearly extinct. But since the late 60s, their numbers have slowly been increasing. The camera changed back to the forest floor, where fresh tracks were scattered around a large pile of broken pine cones. The narration picked up as Corbin saw a wild boar taking its sweet time with its food. Here we see a banquet of nuts dropped by a pregnant pine tree. A herd of boars has been through here, although one remains, electing to stay behind while the others move on to avoid danger. The tiger lowers its body close to the ground, eyes forward, head low beneath the bare bushes. The male tiger creeps low and silent in the underbrush. The packed snow underneath its heavy paws muffle the sound of his approach. Corbin watched the wild pig eat as if nothing was amiss. He had a hand halfway in his chip bag, his hydro flask sitting untouched on the desk. He was enraptured. The music picked up pace and intensity as the narrator continued. The boar suspects nothing before it's too late. The tiger pounced. The boar squealed and tried to get away, but the big cat clamped its paws around its midriff and sank his teeth into the jugular as the music reached a crescendo. The snow soaked in fresh red as the narrator spoke. The tiger's days of effort are rewarded as he finds his first meal in quite some time. He lets out a mighty roar of triumph, although it will prove to be short-lived. For you see, the boar and tiger share some commonalities, such as their tendency to make their meals to go before they find themselves the main course. As if, punctuated by those last few words, Corbin felt a sense of dread settle over him. Not the kind of dread you'd feel watching a suspenseful movie, but the kind of feeling that told the body that something wasn't right anymore. He felt watched. The music had stopped its lovely number. It didn't taper off or slow down. It just stopped like a door, slamming closed. Corbin thought the video had paused, but the tiger kept moving through the silence. This wasn't normal. As the tiger kept eviscerating its prey, the dread built more on top of Corbin. There was something in the video, something dangerous, not just to the tiger but to himself. He just couldn't see it. A noise like a whip moving through the air before the crack. Its source was unknown in the video. Then the tiger was dragged back into the tree line. It disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving its prized meal unattended. Then silence again. Nothing moved. When the narrator spoke, it was like a wall crashing down. Mother Nature cries out in pain as another member of a rare and beautiful species meets a grisly end. The shot faded to black. Then the camera was above the ocean once more. This time Corbin didn't feel that same sense of childlike wonder. He was disturbed beyond words. Music began to swell again, and the narrator spoke as if nothing happened. We returned to the sea, where the dust of history is settled into the rising waters, as sand, rock, and mud. Off the coast of what was known as Saudi Arabia, in the Persian Gulf, the sea is like a hot tub. It gets hotter and saltier than any other open sea in the world. It's surprising that corals can survive. They have miraculously found ways to cope, much to the excitement of sea life. Deeper down, the camera showed coral reefs with muted colors. What once was so vibrant and lively to Corbin, the coral reefs no longer touched him with the same amount of fascination. The narrator continued, "It's different from other coral reefs in the world. This is more like a bombed-out city, devastated by heat and salt. The camera followed a small valley filled on both sides with dilapidated rocks, crumbling coral, and gray vegetation. And in some cases, he said, there are quite literally cities sprouting from the ocean floor, rusted beyond repair and taken over by sea life of all kinds. Then the valley dropped off, and there in the distance was an Atlantean sea. Skyscrapers reached up and poked through the water's surface like rustic buoys. The streets diced up the city into chunks of crusted square meat. This can't be real, Corbin thought, and yet it looked real enough. A lost city in the middle of the ocean. Corbin asked himself, not for the first time, when this documentary was captured. The narrator went on. Small squid began to dance along the cracked asphalt, courting in a psychedelic language of hues and colors. Life in all its wonderful forms will emerge in the Gulf, though it's never obvious. Reefs here are small and isolated. Submerged sandy plains are an extension of the Arabian desert, but here, underwater, rocks turn into cuttlefish on closer inspection. Fan worms cast their nets, mimicking flowers on the sidewalk. A devious eye and a gill belong to a ray, who takes his sweet time cruising down the avenue. The camera moved just outside the city limits, where great swaths of muted green filled the seafloor. Thousands of square kilometers of sand have been colonized by seagrass. The underwater meadows may not look like much, but this is one of the most productive habitats on Earth. Its riches are hard to see. Thin lines of what look like grassy roots swam by on screen. The narrator explained. Shrimp fish look and act like floating seagrass. The camera showed a bulbous, bug-eyed fish hiding in a secluded, shallow pit. Sandy stargazers hide in holes. The camera cut to a large snake lurking along the grassy sand dunes. Its emotionless eyes stared off into the distance. A 6-meter striped sea snake, said the narrator, is one of the most venomous creatures in the world, with over 10 times a rattler's killing power. He hunts fish like little stargazers. The snake slithered along, finding a gaping hole. It struck, a terrifying thrust, even submerged in water. Got one. It wandered a few feet and struck again. And another. The annulated sea snake eats heartily this evening, and rightfully so, to maintain its massive body. The snake looked titanic compared to the small fish that swim around it. The camera panned to a wide shot where Corbin could see its full length. Then a chill ran down his spine when a hulking shadow loomed far away near the city. It moved slowly, almost lethargically. It inspired a deeply welled fear inside of Corbin, the kind of fear he first felt when he saw a picture of Jupiter, its astronomical size making him feel small and insignificant, especially when contrasted against the black void of space. The narrator spoke up. However, far across the coral reefs, where the drop-off takes a plunge into darkness, we see a gargantuan Leadsichthys, well over 30 meters in length. It overshadows the now meek and mild sea snake, making the latter look more like a thread of clothing than a terrifying monster. The camera cut away, and none too soon, for Corbin would have turned off the video out of the intangible fear he had experienced. How many things like that were lurking in the water this instant? He'd discovered a newfound fear of the ocean today. The narrator continued, if the coral reefs are cities abundant with life and culture, then there are bound to be menaces to these miniature societies. A long, thin shark swam past the camera, with fins like icebergs. A 4-meter white-tipped reef shark is recognized and feared. She is the monarch of the elite overworld who flaunts her power and might wherever she goes. Then the camera showed a dark cloud of large fish clustered together in a sinister pack. The narrator explained, "A gathering of giant barracuda near nightfall are gangsters of the seedy underbelly, casting a shadow over the reef. Barracuda gather in hundreds by the drop-off. They're waiting for evening." Corbin watched as they began to swim around and round each other slowly and methodically, creating a barrier. The nocturnal pack hunters form the Wheel of Death, ready to tear apart anything that moves or breathes. Schools of fish bob and weave when they sense the danger, but some wander too closely and are dragged into the circle, and the center collapses. True to the narrator's words, a plump fish fell into the barracuda's radar, and the spinning wheel shuts closed like an eyeball. The frenzy in the water lasted a few seconds, and then Corbin saw that the wheel reformed effortlessly. The camera pulled up and away from the water to the air. The scene changed, and feathered wings filled the screen. "The world of flight belongs to the birds." Corbin stared from an aerial view as tiny white specks filled up a small island. A close-up of the birds showed that they had plump bodies and thin wings and feet. A long beak protruded from their faces. The narrator went on, "Here we see nearly 500,000 Kelioshag, 3/4 of the world's population. These fascinating birds breed here on the island of Callio in what was known as South America. Featherless chicks shiver each morning. Nights are cold here. Life in the colony is dangerous, loud, and smelly. Young chicks of various ages and the older ones hang out in gangs. The younger chicks still need babysitters. Everyone is hungry." The camera filled with squawking, squabbling birds. There were mainly flying through the air, many more dotting the desolate ground. Gulls attack undefended chicks because they can find little food elsewhere. Even cannibalism is common. To emphasize this, a fully feathered shag snatched a small chick on camera and gobbled it whole. The mother chased after the deviant bird. The females are all white-feathered and do their best to protect their young. It is an uphill battle. Temperatures swing from too cold to too hot in a few hours. Birds can't sweat and pant desperately to keep cool. There's no shade and no food. Piles of whitefish, yellow bones littered some of the ground. Corbin was horrified to see that some skulls closely resembled those of a human. Gulls and shags peck at bones and remains of a lost civilization, but still find nothing to satiate their hunger. The camera pointed to the horizon, where something far away was approaching fast. "Salvation appears first as a thin black line," the narrator explained. The music swelled with hopeful energy. "After a morning's fishing, tens of thousands of black-feathered males return to the colony with food. The first problem for families is to find each other. The air was full of chittering birds, and Corbin watched as the females scrambled around to find their partner. The lucky ones are fed quickly, but they better be careful, because the inside of a Callia's shag's mouth is lined with hundreds of needle-like teeth. Feeding time is a precise yet quick excursion and can turn messy in a flash." Corbin saw a white-feathered mother suddenly pull away from her mate, finding her head covered with gashes. She went back for more. "Some females," the narrator said, "are impatient and attempt to exhort a handsome passerby trying to look for his family." The camera showed a female waddling up to a male and putting a thin wing around his waist, like a drunken barfly trying to pick up a much younger woman on the town. If the female is too persistent, or if the male is annoyed enough, he'll bite her head off. Corbin stared as the miffed black feathered male opened its mouth wide, showing slim glittering teeth, and tore the female's head off her neck. A red river spilled onto the sand. The camera cut away quickly. After all that, the narrator continued, the last thing you want is to be mugged for the only meal of the day. Hungry shags and reef herons wait until chicks are being fed, then swoop in. Fights broke along the shoreline. Corbin saw that the shags had a hard time defending both their young and their dinner from greedy herons. More heads topple, and wings were pulled free from their sockets. Corbin could only stare, transfixed and unmoving in a sort of horrid fascination. Just when you thought it couldn't get any tougher, the wind becomes a sandstorm. Sand, dirt, and blood are blown across the island and into the sea. The timing could not have been more unfortunate, for the blood begins to attract hordes of sand spiders. The camera showed piles of sand moving fast along the shore and into the midst of the small island, where they approached the fighting birds. Then the spiders burst through the surface. They were big and fat, with bulbous abdomens and long, slender legs. The biggest spiders Corbin had ever seen, real or imaginary, as big as full-grown basset hounds. These fast and deadly arachnids live underneath the surface of long sandbars and isolated islands. The narrator didn't skip a beat. It just so happens they were lying in wait underneath an all-you-can-eat buffet. It is an absolute massacre. The colony is decimated within minutes. The lucky ones abandon their young and flee for another strip of land. There are some shags who are too injured to fly, and they limp into the sea past the coral reef, where gangster barracuda extend their wheel of death, and the center folds once again. Corbin was only momentarily aware that he had dropped his bag of chips to the floor. He wasn't hungry anymore. The scene changed to a tall forest canopy, and the narrator kept speaking. Nothing is as it seems in the animal kingdom, both in the sea and on land. Hidden in the vegetation of the moist redwood forest floor is a richly populated underworld. Male rough-skinned newts are driven by a mysterious urge to return to the pool where they hatched as tadpoles, and they need to get there quickly. Not only is the competition always fierce, but predators lurk around every corner of the forest floor. The yellow-tinged newts crawled infuriatingly slowly across the screen, dragging their flat bodies across wet dirt and slippery logs. Then, without warning, several bristly prongs sprung up from the ground and wrapped around a newt, dragging it underneath the soil. One very unlucky newt falls victim to the trapdoor beetle's ploy and is gobbled up quickly. The rest veer the newly formed pit, learning from their fallen comrade's mistake. And yet, as they will soon learn, this was never planned to be an isolated incident. Columns of dirt blow up as more legs spring up and attack in front of the camera. The beetles must have been huge if they were big enough to grapple an adult newt. One by one, said the narrator, many more are plucked from underneath the ground by long insectile legs, and the moist dirt lying below the quaint forest canopy turns into a minefield. Only a small percentage make it to the pond, where females lie in waiting for a suitable mate. The mating ritual of rough-hewn newts can take up to several hours, and night falls quickly in these parts. However, unbeknownst to the amicable amphibians, a new enemy makes his grand debut. The camera panned from the peaceful pond to a nearby tree. A grotesque bug crawled out from the roots. Corbin recoiled from his monitor. The thing made him physically sick to look at. A purple-spined centipede scuttles out from its hiding place. A terrifying sight to look at, it shortly proves itself to be far more dangerous than your wildest imaginations. It finds the water's edge and spits into it, turning the once serene pond toxic within seconds. The newts are cooked alive underwater, and their bloated bodies float to the surface, giving off a horrid stench that is unappealing to any creature except the purple-spined centipede. Eventually the corpses will make their way to the edge of the pond, where the centipede gorges itself on fresh meat for hours. Once it is finished, it will go into a quick hibernation, and it won't be searching for another meal for several months. The great monstrosity went back into his hiding hole, and the camera cut to black momentarily. Corbin's eyes were soon ambushed with a flurry of disturbing images, accompanied by discordant music. Giant lobsters stripping apart the tender flesh of a beached whale, an orange-furred tarantula crawling out of a human skull, a raven with a moist eyeball in its beak sitting atop a mountain of discarded bones in the middle of an arid desert. The music tore apart at his ears. The notes were disorganized, pitched too deep with incredibly shrill whines. He shut his eyes at the onslaught and only opened them when the narrator spoke again. Animals of all shapes and sizes pose a threat to certain creatures, even on a microscopic level. The camera had switched scenes back to a forest floor. It showed a large, beet-red larva of some sort crawling along slowly. Only when it passed a tiny acorn did Corbin understand how big this creature really was. Here we see a sickly fellow. The behemoth caterpillar is usually a robust and lively specimen, but this one is dying from an unseen predator. It is infected with a virus, a rather deadly one at that. The F. Vrasmusrumpir virus is a nasty bug that heats up the body temperature of a host well past its capable limits. All stored fat is used up and burned to generate more heat, causing the insides to literally melt and boil until the poor caterpillar on screen exploded from the inside, splitting its lumpy body in half and spilling chunks of rancid flesh everywhere. The skin ruptures and the poor caterpillar is split in two. The stench of raw meat attracts birds and insects, where they peck and tear at the still-living creature until it is nothing but a husk. Little do these ravagers know that by eating the flesh of the caterpillar, they have infected themselves with the boiling virus, and the cycle continues. The F. Vrasmusrumpir virus can be contracted by most animals, spreading through exposed blood and bodily fluids, making it the deadliest and most violent virus on the planet. And yes, it is infectious to humans. The camera panned back, and Corbin saw a CGI rendering of the entire globe, but it was not a world he recognized. The entire eastern half of Europe was underwater. Many of the southern states and Midwest of America were completely flooded. A huge lake sat in the middle of Africa. Massive islands formed in the middle of huge continents. It was an alien atlas, a world Corbin could not understand nor fully comprehend. The narrator spoke up. But the horror does not stop there, for the world, as we know it, has steadily taken a trip back in time, where prehistoric-like animals roam freely. The images Corbin had seen thus far were only the beginning. The documentary kept playing, showing a cascade of unending horror. A herd of helicoprion, with jaws like a sea urchin prowling the darkest depths of the ocean. A titanoboa swallowing a macaque monkey whole. Disease-ridden millipedes festering over a decaying corpse. Crocodiles as long as basketball courts hunting along a shallow riverbank. A hive of hornets making a honeypot out of the abdomen of a dying ox. Corbin didn't have the courage to check and see how much time was left in the movie. Then there were the things he couldn't unsee. Colossal, lumbering mammoths, taller than ethereal treetops, a bipedal lizard hominid that feasted on wild goats and sheep, a great wolf with drooling teeth and dark eyes, small monkey-like creatures that tore apart their prey with vicious speed, a mingwa, a female hyena hybrid, stalking the African Serengeti. The terrors weren't ceasing, and Corbin could not force his eyes away. It is uncertain where all of these unearthly beasts appeared, but scientists have a relative understanding. The camera cuts to an aerial view where a great ice blanket covers everything in sight. Believe it or not, the narrator continues, this is the North Pole. A large sheet of ice is all that remains of the polar ice caps. Both the northern and southern ice caps used to house over 2% of all the water in the world, compacted into ice and snow. But frozen water was not all that lay underneath the tundra. The camera cut to beneath the ice. Corbin saw animals of all shapes and colors, petrified like still life paintings. A prehistoric world frozen in time long forgotten. When the rains of calamity came down from the atmosphere, it sheared the ice shelves and melted the caps, releasing these monstrous beasts onto the world. They migrated through the glaciers and made their way from the top of the northern hemisphere and the bottom of the southern hemisphere. It was utter chaos. Amateur footage was plastered on the screen, showing droves of people in cities running away from predators and monsters. The advancing tides of terrifying creatures was like a pincer move on the world. As a result of calamity and the onslaught of prehistoricals, a third of the world's population was lost, both animal and human. The camera switched scenes to an incredible cavern, cut deep inside a rich mountain where great columns of stone supported a rooftop which oversaw complex yet vibrant cities. Humans have been forced underground, where we have made our home underneath the mountains for the past several generations. Here we're safe from the dangers of prehistoricals and rising sea levels. Now, as the bicentennial anniversary of calamity nears, we look back and remember where we have come from, why we stay in the mountains, and that the world outside is waiting for us when we're ready to fight back. It's still far too soon to venture outside, but once we do, our civilization will do what it does best: persevere. Then it was mercifully over. The screen faded to black, and a few sparse credits floated from the bottom. Narrated by Tiber Islesworth. Visual renderings provided by the Rocky Mountain Coalition for the Preservation of the Underground, paid for by the Apophis Foundation. The last credit was followed by a symbol of a small circle with 3 evenly spaced curly C's sprouting from the wheel. As the last image shambled out of sight, Corbin heard the fan on his laptop whirl wildly. His mouse was unresponsive. The computer shut down, and when he booted it up again, the video player had closed. He tried searching for the movie in his files. Nothing came up. When he revisited the email Raimi had sent him earlier that day, the attachment was missing. Corbin's head throbbed with what he just saw. This has to have been a joke. But who would have invested so much time and effort on a simple prank? The visuals were incredibly realistic, but evidently fake. According to the end, only the visual renderings were credited, meaning they were all an imitation of genuine cinematography. Lifelike, but an imitation all the same. He checked his phone. It was midnight. There were a few notifications from Raimi that were sent hours prior. They said, "Hey, did you get the email? Better pay the piper and send those digits. What was her name again?" Then later, "Come on, Corb. Don't leave a man out to dry. What are those digits?" Then, much later, "Whoa, hold on. Sent you the wrong one. It won't play on my media player anymore. Was probably a bum copy. I'll find the real version and let you know." And so, am I getting that number tonight? There was one final email from Raimi. It said, "Sorry, here's the right one. This should work this time. Also, check your messages, numbnuts." Then nothing else. Corbin opened the attachment. A grainy video started to play on his desktop, showing some birds fly by, accompanied by lethargic narration. This was the real documentary. It appeared as lazy and non-committal as his professor, and it was hardly a half-hour long. He closed his laptop and leaned back far in his chair. His head was dizzy with dehydration. He hadn't touched his hydro flask. He was plagued with a difficult question. What had he just seen? No matter what avenue of reason he followed, it all led to a troublesome conclusion. It was a warning. A great calamity would strike the planet sometime in the future. It could happen decades down the road, years, days, or even tomorrow. He had no idea what he wanted to do with that crucial information. Instead, Corbin flipped off the lights and slipped into bed, clothes and all. He silenced his phone alarm and rolled over, planning to sleep in late. He'll just take the day off tomorrow. Maybe even talk to his counselor about switching his major. He fell asleep to heavy rain pounding against his window. There's nothing quite like a home-cooked meal. Restaurants and takeout just can't compete for some reason, and it's just not the deliciousness. It's the feeling of accomplishment that comes with it. The pride in bettering your kitchen craft with or for the people you love. Good stuff, no? But it's not all roses. You gotta deal with planning, tracking down recipes, stressful trips to the grocery, measuring out said ingredients, making a mess, and any number of other miseries associated with cooking at home. But now there's hope. With HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit, you'll enjoy preparing mouth-watering seasonal recipes with all the fresh, pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door. HelloFresh cuts out the stressful meal planning and grocery trips so you can enjoy the satisfaction of cooking amazing food at home even more. Short on time? HelloFresh offers meals ready in just 20 minutes with quick but delicious breakfasts and lunches. Perfect for life in the fast lane. Short on cash? HelloFresh is 28% cheaper than grocery store shopping and 72% cheaper than eating out without sacrificing a micron of quality. Personally, I'm loving the bulgogi beef bowl, a recipe I would never think to prepare on my own. Thanks to HelloFresh, I prepared and consumed said beef bowl, both faster than anticipated. Afterwards, I was struck by a significant boost in kitchen confidence, something definitely not on the menu at a restaurant. Not a bulgogi beef person? No worries. You will not be hurting for variety. HelloFresh offers 25 plus recipes to choose from every week, and for even more variety, HelloFresh has recently partnered with Green Chef. You'll get the best of both brands at the same discount. So why put it off? Go to HelloFresh.com/told12 and use code TOLD12, that's TOLD12, for 12 free meals, including free shipping. One more time. Go to HelloFresh.com/told12 and use code TOLD12 for 12 free meals, including free shipping. I hope you enjoyed Red Earth, as written by author Jackson Barnard and performed by yours truly. If you enjoyed that first tale and would love to read more from tonight's very talented feature author, you can help support him by visiting simplyscarypodcast.com/Barnard. That's simplyscarypodcast.com/Barnard, spelled Barnard. From there, you'll be redirected to his profile on our horror fiction site, creepypastastories.com, where you can learn more about our featured author, get in touch with him, or check out more of his work absolutely free. If you do decide to stop by his profile, please leave JC a kind word and let him know you heard about him on this show and that Otis sent you. It would mean a lot to me. Thanks again for your support of this program and of tonight's featured author. Well, I just love a good documentary, don't you? There's nothing like a little nature to get the blood flowing. In more ways than one, as our last tale showed. If you're in the mood to follow me once more down the old dark paths of the mysterious, Mr. Barnard has one more tale to share with you. It's never a good thing to wake up and not remember who you are. It's even worse when you wake up in the dark, your head is hurting, and you seem to be lost in what could only be described as the world's strangest haunted house. But there's not much entertainment to be found here, at least not for our unfortunate victim. Without further ado, I present to you Underneath the Mask. There are sounds in the haze. You just have to be more alert to their subtleties to hear them. The sound travels between the thin line that divides the conscious from the unconscious, and when she woke up on the cold, hard ground, she could only remember those minute sounds she heard in the haze. She came to only when a brick fell from the rotted ceiling, although it was too dark for her to tell if it was a brick or where it fell from. The sound was like a gunshot, and she thrashed from the haze like a swimmer trying to stay afloat in the thralls of an undertow. The crack of the brick was what she heard, the concrete ground was what she felt, and she could see nothing. Those diminishing sounds from the haze, were they voices or radio static, were now an afterthought because fear had settled in over her shivering body. Where am I? A valid question, surely. If a person is lucky enough, they will only experience a heavy dose of the haze twice in their lives. Once when they're very young, when the sponginess of their brains is malleable enough to hold memories, and they begin their conscious lives. And the second time is that curtain between life and death, where no one alive can tell how deep and how far that haze goes. So, when she swum through the haze, the second time of what was now at least to be 3 times in her life, her discombobulated mind had dumped her in the storage room with no rhyme or reason, no answers, and no light to see. Asking the empty air where she was, that was a good place to start, but a better question would have been the one she asked next. Who am I? There were no memories that trickled through the haze with her to this dark, depressive room. She could not remember how she got here, what her life was like, her family, friends. There was no one home, and the lights were off, so to speak. She couldn't even remember her own name. That was a blank slate. Everything in her mind had been wiped clean into a sea of darkness, akin to the sea of darkness that surrounded her. Hardly any light penetrated through her looking glasses, even when her eyes tried to adjust to the inky blackness. She was alone and afraid in a strange, disturbing world. The girl attempted to get up but was pushed back down with a nasty migraine. Migraine was the closest she could describe it, since it didn't feel like the pain was localized inside her head. Rather, it felt like a chisel being hammered into the soft spot between her eyes. It didn't last long, and as the ache drifted away like leaves down a river, she thought she heard a voice, as distant as a lost radio frequency. It was soft enough to be nearly indistinguishable at first, but it became more defined, as if the knob was turned just a smidge and the voice was coming in loud and clear. It sounded feminine, and she was able to glean the last few words before it faded to obscurity. It wasn't your fault. And that was it, before the knob turned away and she was left with the ghost of a deep impression on her forehead. She felt around for the telltale signs of injury, but there was no ripped skin, no open gash, no wet tacticity of blood left on her fingers. The migraine had simply vanished back into the haze, as far as she knew. She patted all over her body, taking in her simple inventory of a loose shirt, pants with tiny pockets, and worn shoes. A bulge stuck out from one of her pockets. She wrestled it out and felt along its oblong shape. It felt smooth and metallic, with two loose protrusions on either side of a thin bar. A long slit was cut into the side next to the protrusions. It was far too dark to see anything meaningful, so she put it back. She got up and reached out with her hands and feet, feeling for a wall. She knew the air was too stale and too quiet to be outside, so she could figure out that she was in a shadowy dark room. Her hands reached solid brick, and feeling around, noticed that the wall was thin before splitting off away from her on both sides. She realized it was a column, sprouting out from the floor and reaching up to the heights unseen. What lay beyond her sight, where the sturdy brick column met the tall looming ceiling, she could only imagine in her mind's eye, and what her mind's eye showed her were glittering irises and drooling maws. If such a room needed columns for support, then it was an incredibly wide room, wide enough to hide creatures of the dark, crouched into corners and hidden between cracks in the concrete. She kept moving, undeterred by the fear her own mind conjured up for her. Eventually, she found a wall made of peeling paper and splintered wood. She followed it until she tripped over something big and heavy. A pile of bricks lay against the wall. They were unorganized, as if dumped from a great height. The girl thought these could come in handy, and grabbed a few in her hands. She realized she didn't have a better way to carry more than a few, so she took one in each hand and kept following the wall. Up ahead, there was a faint, dim outline, the first hint of light she had yet seen. She shambled to her salvation, taking care of the cracks and jutting outcroppings in the cement. She reached the light and saw that it was leaking underneath a door frame. With the small amount of light allowed to her, she recognized that the door looked dense, made of solid metal. She placed the bricks down nearby and pushed hard on the door. It wouldn't budge. She grasped the latch and pulled it back, where it moved slowly and then opened enough for her to slip through. She picked up her bricks and stepped into the glorious light. It was a long hallway, littered with doors on either side. Lights hung from the low ceiling, showing the disarray. Holes punctured the walls like mortar fire. There were wooden planks and crossbeams poking through the ceiling. Moss and vegetation stuck through cracks in the ground. Blue, illegible writing stood out from the sterile white walls, and when she stood too close to a graffiti patch, her nose twitched from a distinct smell that reminded her of bleach. A small shriek of metal screamed behind her, and she turned and saw the door closing. Guided by a deeply welled habit, she stopped the door with her foot and planted one of her precious bricks as a door stopper. Just in case I need to backtrack, she told herself. The sound of her own voice frightened her. The only things that looked to be undefiled in the hallway are the doors, which were all spotless and shined like polished steel. The girl went from door to door, trying each handle. None of them turned all the way. The lock caught for each one. There were no keyholes on the outside, or if there were any, they all faded along with the hallway. On each door there was a number, crafted in bronze plating with a meticulous hand. She noticed with each passing door that the number descended, with odd numbers on the right and even numbers on the left. She counted each number: 692, 691, 690, 689, while she tried the handle, finding no luck. She didn't realize she'd reached the end of the hallway until she tried the handle to door 600 and looked up to see a blank wall. There was nothing left in the hallway, and she'd tried every door with nothing to show for it. She sighed, knowing that she must backtrack to the dark room and try to find another exit in complete blindness. If only she had a flashlight or a box of matches, that would help her immensely. The thought of a box of matches made her throat run dry, and she licked her cracked lips. She became so lost in thought that she nearly missed the mahogany door that wasn't there before. She stopped and had to turn around to see if she was mistaken. There was a door in the middle of the hallway that wasn't there when she went down the first time. It sat between 668 and 664, and it was made of deep, nearly red-tinged mahogany wood. A brass knob protruded from the smooth wood, and she tested it. The knob turned with ease. It opened inward, and she gingerly stepped through. She was about to put her second brick down in the door and retrieve the other one when the agony in her head erupted. That same head-splitting pain morphed between her eyes. It was more agitated this time. She could taste the coppery tinge of torment. She collapsed, her brick discarded to the side, and curled up on the ground. Through the insistent and annoying ringing, she heard another voice. It was deep and more defined, the baritone of a grown man whispering from somewhere she couldn't see and didn't have the strength to open her eyes. Owe her at least this. It faded in and out before she could figure out more of what he had said. The agony subsided, and a part of her was disappointed. The door had closed behind her, and she was shaken to see that there was no knob or handle on her side. There was hardly an outcropping in the wall to suggest that a door had been there. The mahogany camouflaged expertly with the rest of the finely crafted wooden wall. She would not be able to retrieve her brick, and so, with her last remaining in her hand, she faced the room she entered. It wasn't a room. A dimly lit hallway met her gaze. It was not as decrepit as the last, but neglect and abandonment were painted on the walls and floors. No doors were in sight, but flickering candles for light sat on flimsy stools and chairs. How long had these been set out, and by whom? She inspected one closely. It burned brightly, but it did not eat away at the wick, and there was no puddle of wax dripping over the edges. When she looked away, an impression of the candle had branded itself in her vision, sending her stars and nebula of dancing light. In the distance was a T-section where the hallway split. She started walking toward it. A stench mingled around her nose as she got closer, reminding her of those blue writings in the other hallway, but it was sharper and left a sour taste on her tongue. She reached the intersection and found the source of the smell. It was a body. It was slumped against the far wall. Its head hung low where a deep gash was inscribed into its neck. Dried blood dribbled onto its white shirt and around the floor. Its fingers were dipped in a dark crimson. The girl never knew how dark blood could be when there was a lot of it, The corpse held a small ripped sheet of paper in one stiff hand. It piqued the girl's curiosity, but her fear kept her away. She imagined the body springing to life and tackling her when she got close. She grabbed a nearby stool, being careful to take the candle off and place it to the side. She softly approached the body, holding the stool out like a lion tamer in the circus. She prodded the dead body. Nothing happened. She poked it harder, hard enough for it to lean over and for her hair to part away from its eyes. The lids were closed, where more congealed blood had gathered underneath its crusty eyelashes. Truly, this poor soul was dead, and the girl vowed not to end up like it while she was still kicking and screaming. She pried the paper from the pale figure and unfolded it. The paper was grimy and tinged with a deep red, but the blue ink was bold enough to be legible and easy to read. It had 2 arrows pointing in opposite directions, one indicating the path on the right, the other for the path on the left. Underneath the left arrow was a message: to truth and everlasting pain. The other message underneath the right arrow read, to eternal darkness and insanity. Truth or darkness? Pain or insanity? Pan's Labyrinth certainly wasn't giving her any agreeable options. She stood in the middle of the intersection, the burden of indecisiveness planting her feet to the ground. It took her a long time to get moving, and when she finally compelled her body to go, she chose the path on the right. Whether it was because of innate curiosity to explore the territory before making her decision, or if she was answering the call of the void, can be never known for sure. What is known is that the hallway curved to the right as she walked, passing by more candles, until she came across a set of elevator doors. They were rusted, decorated with what was once ornate patterns and gold finishings. Blue writing was scrawled on the exterior: "Take the plunge." She dragged the doors open and was met with an empty elevator shaft. Long pipes and steel beams fell down into the dark abyss. She didn't see how far down the shaft went. The dim light from the candles couldn't satisfy her eyes. She picked up a nearby candle and dropped it, base first, into the shaft, where the light fell away quickly and was swallowed by the darkness. She listened for the sound of impact, but it never came rolling up from the depths. Next, she dropped a small wooden chair the candle had been sitting on, and it too fell far and fast, without giving away any noise. The void was bottomless, and she had no intention of climbing down such a perilous place. She looked up and noticed that there were more blue writing along the shaft walls. It said, "Don't turn back." Was that a threat or a plea? She felt whispers of wind crawling along her back, and she imagined the corpse ambling up behind her, arms outstretched, ready to push her off the cusp of oblivion. She turned around and saw nothing. The hallway disappeared back to the left, just as she had left it. This was a dead end. She backtracked through the hallway, and when she passed the T section, she was pleased to see that both dead bodies were exactly where she had left them. The one in the white shirt was still slumped against the far wall, and the one in the blue shirt lay motionless along the closer wall. No, wait. Why were there 2? She thought. She snapped back around. Her eyes did not deceive her. There were 2 carcasses in the hallway. The newer one, the one in the blue shirt, looked just like the other. It had similar hair, a similar body structure, a similar cut along its slender white neck. The only marked difference was a different colored shirt. It didn't move, but the girl was too wary of its presence to turn her back on it. Either someone moved it into place, or it moved itself. She didn't plan on staying around to find out either way. As the curve of the hallway leaned into her path, she kept her eyes on the seemingly lifeless body until it vanished from her sight. Then she walked forward, eyes straight, only turning back to see if something was following her. Was that a hint of blue around the corner, or was it a trick of the dying candlelight? She walked the path of truth and pain. Time passed gradually, so slowly it infected her mind. This path was longer than the other. She could feel it in the worn grooves of her shoes. Eventually, the curve of the hallway evened out enough so that she could see a door at the end. It was made of rich mahogany, like the door in the other hallway. There were markings crudely scratched on the tough exterior, and the girl squinted her eyes enough to read. "There is no escape." She twisted the brass knob and entered the room. It was considerably darker here than in the hallway. No lights were strung from the ceiling, nor were there candles to guide her. She propped the door open with her last brick and saw that it was a hospital room. An IV was set by a gurney with grimy sheets and dark stains. A table sat on the other side, holding scattered pills of many sizes and colors. A shredded curtain was pulled back along the bedside. The walls were a spotless, sterile gray, and there were no other doors. There was a window on the far wall, and the girl felt a rush of exalted relief to see moonlight pierce through the tinted glass. She ran forward and found that the window was built high above the ground, preventing her from seeing anything but the glittering light from the moon behind thin clouds. She needed something she could stand on. Then there was a scrape, like that of a stone being dragged along rough concrete. She turned, and what she saw sent electric shivers down her spine. The corpse with the blue shirt was leaning against the open door. It had pushed the brick out of the way, and the only thing keeping the heavy door open was itself. It raised its head to look at the girl. The girl was horrified to see that its eyelids had parted, but there was no glassy eyes underneath, just two dark red pits of open sinew and bone. It raised a scabby finger over its lips. No sound escaped its mouth or exposed neck. It started pulling the door closed. "No!" she screamed. The thing had the door halfway closed when she bolted forward, but by then her action was too late. It shut the door completely. The girl grasped the knob and turned it back and forth. It was locked from the outside. She saw the shadow of the corpse underneath the doorframe as it staggered away to join its compatriot and those burning candles. A heavy crash compelled her to take her hands off the knob. The room had been thrown into chaos. The bed had been upturned, its frame scattered in pieces, and the bumpy mattress slumped against the wall like a dead animal on the side of the road. The IV bag had been knocked down, water seeped out of the pouch and mixed with the pills. The curtain was fluttering in the air before settling in a far corner. The walls had been defiled with deep scratches and splotches of blue. A shadow was blocking the moonlight, and the girl noticed that something was drawn on the window. A clown's face. Its soulless eyes were sunk back into the abyss of its sockets, and its mouth contorted into a wicked grin, a smile that could never be anatomically possible. Its lips reached the tips of its ears, and it flashed a set of gnarled, sharp teeth. The image stood as a dark omen in the room, painting the once blissful moonlight into a curse. The girl no longer thought of a reanimated corpse. She didn't wonder what had thrashed the room so quickly and violently. She didn't want to know who painted the clown face on the window. All she thought about was that she was trapped in this room. There was no way out. Not quite, her intuition told her. Indeed, there had to be something that the frayed ends of her senses had picked up that she was not wholly aware of at first. And there it was, on the floor where the bed used to stand, a prominent outline in the shape of a square, where the color was mismatched with the rest of the ground. She walked over to it and saw that a small rope handle hung loosely from one of the ends. She pulled on it, and the whole frame lifted up to show a small crawl space. She peeked in, hanging her head upside down from the ground above. The crawl space looked big enough to support her size if she squeezed in, and it went off in one direction. She looked up to the window one last time, seeing the clown's face in all its sinister glory. She crouched low into the space and started crawling forward. It was dark, and she felt the walls on all sides close together. It was the same oppressive darkness as the first room, but she was forced into a vulnerable position where everything felt claustrophobic. She ventured on carefully, filling out the space in front of her. It didn't help much, since she didn't feel the pit until her arm reached out to find empty space, and her body followed. For one sickening moment, there was that nausea of weightlessness pitted in her stomach. Before she could register the fright, her back thumped lightly against a slick vertical wall, and she flew down a chute. I love this job. In many ways, recording is one of the best jobs you can have. No HR departments, no irksome, chatty coworkers over in that next cubicle, the kind appreciation of the listeners, the quiet work environment. What more could a guy ask for? But it's not all gravy. Sometimes it's downright tedious. All the little mouth sounds, the tyranny of airplanes, the plague that is motorcycles and dogs. Oh, the dogs. With all that barking, it's amazing they have time to breathe. Yes, things that would be considered at worst a minor irritant to everybody else becomes a hair-pulling, nail-biting, tongue-severing frustration to council jockeys and all those who ride the waveform. It's enough to make a man sick. Under all that pressure, it should come as no surprise that many of us are compelled to seek out counseling. Counseling that's convenient, professional, affordable, and from the comfort of home, or at least not in an awkward waiting room with worn workout magazines and a curiously judgmental clerk behind the desk. But where would I find such a service? Well, I'll tell you where. BetterHelp. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, and it's not self-help. It's professional counseling done online for whatever mental health issue might be interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals. BetterHelp will assess your needs and connect you with a licensed therapist in under 48 hours. Anything you share is confidential, and BetterHelp makes it free and easy to change counselors should the need arise. BetterHelp is a service available worldwide, so individuals need no longer feel limited only to counselors located near them. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. So don't put your peace of mind on hold any longer. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/horror. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, spelled BetterHelp.com/horror. She was unprepared for the sharp twists and turns, bumps and drops, zigzags and straightaways. She couldn't see where she was going, nor had any sense of how far the thing went down. Her vision blurred as another headache sprouted from her forehead. She could feel herself going cross-eyed from the agony. It was hard to focus, hard to think, hard to feel the wind whip through her clothes and hair as she fell further into darkness. There was only the pain and a small voice ringing above the howling wind. Beyond help. The girl passed out soon after. She crawled her way out of the fog and found herself lying on a mattress. It wasn't the haze she saw. The mist in her mind was too light, carrying her like a buoyant raft on the open ocean. She'd been dumped into another hallway, with warm lamps strung from the ceiling. There were many doors spaced out on either side, which she assumed were all locked. A large square hole, 2 feet off the ground, seemed out of place behind her along the wall. That was the end of the chute, evidently. She got up, dusted herself off, and followed the hallway. She ignored all the lightly colored wooden doors, instead focusing on the set of double doors at the end of the hallway. She noticed that they had 2 opaque windows on either side, and as she got closer, saw that they were swinging doors. She heard a soft dripping sound the more she followed the hallway. It was coming from the inside of the mysterious room, and as she pushed the swinging doors open, she understood why. Hundreds of chains hung from a tall ceiling. Connected to these chains were messy straitjackets. They were filled with bodies, strung upside down like red bats, an orchestra of soft dripping, like a warehouse of leaky faucets, came from these suspended carcass cocoons. Pools of blood lay on the tiled floor, wooden tables scattered around the room covered with exposed corpses that looked like botched autopsies. There were butcher tables, cutting boards, saw boards, racks, and other tables the girl couldn't find the words to describe. A collection of assorted knives, blades, swords, axes, hammers, surgical tools, drills, and saws were displayed along the walls. Flies buzzed around the fresh meat. This was a mausoleum of manslaughter. A single wooden door sat on the other far side of the room. The girl drifted dreamily past the tables and cadavers. Her fragile mind could not digest the inhumanity of this place, and so she wandered like a headless chicken. She only wanted one thing: to go through the door. All she knew were doors, and they always brought fresh nightmares. But that's how she journeyed through this god-forsaken hellscape. She was in the middle of the room, caught halfway between the entry and her escape, when she heard a long, low creak to her left. A large panel of the wall had come loose, pushed by a beefy arm and covered with a thick black glove. A gargantuan thing stepped out. Its leather boots were soaked in blood and gore. Its jeans were dirty with grime, and it wore large denim overalls over a black padded jacket that looked burnt instead of washed. It held a massive sledgehammer in one of its paws, and its face was not a face. It wore a mask, a clown mask. It wore those familiar, soulless eyes, wicked smile, and impossibly sharp teeth. It noticed the girl standing in the middle of the room, and they both experienced a shared stalemate. In truth, it appeared she had initially scared it more than it scared her, if just for a moment. A bad first impression, perhaps. They observed each other like nature in the wild. Neither of them moved, as if one secretly dared the other to make the first move. The bulking beast was the first to oblige. "Fresh meat," it said, then charged. The thing stampeded through tables, toppling them aside as if they weighed nothing. Bodies dropped to the dirty floor with sickening plops. Red puddles splashed around it as the beast plowed forward with inhuman speed. The girl sprang into action, flying away as if guided by animalistic instincts. She bobbed around, vaulted over, and weaved through the tables. They were getting more and more clustered as the door came closer, while the thing behind her was undeterred by these obstacles. It seemed to enjoy the high of the chase. "You'll make a fine addition," it bellowed. She was close to the door. She could see the glitter of its brass knob. Several tables were bunched together in a knot, becoming a barrier in her way. The clown beast was too close to catching her, and she couldn't afford to slow down. She dropped down and slid under the tables, aided by the streams of blood that helped keep her momentum. She slammed into the door. The thing yelled behind her as she popped back up and put her hand on the knob. "Clever girl," it said. She twisted the knob. "But you won't escape me that easily." It didn't move. No one has. She turned it the other way. "And no one will," the thing mocked. The door was locked shut. She was trapped. She turned around to see the clown beast meticulously stepping around those last few tables, as if it wanted to savor its victory. The thing was so close that she could read a name tag pinned to its disgusting overalls. Ezra. Her mind screamed for a way out. She was surrounded on all sides by heavy-looking tables and hooks. If she made a move to flank the beast, it would charge again and she'd be done for. No, she bided her time, looking for an opening. There was only one single table between her and the thing. It passed the sledgehammer from hand to hand lightly, ready to strike at any moment. She could feel its vile smile behind the mask. The sick monster was enjoying this. The beast brought the hammer high over its head and swung it down on the table, splintering it into a pile of wood chips and fire tinder. "Now!" her mind commanded. She pushed off the door and slid around the hammer, propelling herself between the beast's legs. She ducked underneath the last few tables and started to run. The clown beast was caught off guard and took its time to recover. She traced the alley that the clown had made when it split the room of tables like the Red Sea. It had made a clear path back to the open panel in the wall from where it had come, and the girl followed it quickly. By the time the beast had figured out what had happened, she'd reached the open hole and was closing the flap behind her. "Stop!" the thing yelled. "You cannot escape. No one can escape." And its voice was cut off by the clunk of the panel door as it slid into place. She had gotten away from the clown. But this was no time to rest. The thing would be pursuing its prey with vigor and determination. Who knew how many secret paths were carved into this tumble-down building? The whole place was the home of that beast, as far as she was concerned. The girl was in a small room that looked more like a mad butcher's shop. Dark blood splattered along the counters, sinks, tables, and cabinets, while squishy bags filled with organs were haphazardly tucked in corners and inside of an open fridge. A long gray intestine was strung up by a hook, its sloppy end falling down into the gaping hole of a dead man's torso. The girl clutched her stomach and looked away. There was a door on the other side of the tiny workplace, a way out. As she passed the table with the dissected body, she spotted a long butcher's knife on a cutting block. She took it and held it close as she got to the door. With a shaking hand, she lightly tried the knob. It twisted easily enough, and she walked out into another hallway. To her right, the hallway disappeared into darkness, as deep and as black as the elevator shaft. To her left, the hallway stretched into light, where bright lamps burned and a single door was placed invitingly at the end. The door behind her shut. She heard a crash to the right, deafening and destructive. The clown beast had come barreling through the wall, far back into the darkness. She could see the glint of the mask, and it looked up to discover its prey lying in wait. "Found you, little pig!" The girl sprinted toward the light and the door. The beast gave chase and was soon nipping at her heels. She could feel its hot, rancid breath on the nape of her neck. A glowing red lamp sat poised above the door, where it shone a single number etched into the magnificent wood. 0. The thing was too close. She wouldn't have time to try the handle. She lowered her shoulder and charged through the door, and it mercifully gave way. Pain exploded from her arm as she rolled into the final room. The walls were filled with mirrors. A never-ending expanse filled her sight, and the girl was granted with the first glimpse of herself in those bouncing reflections. She saw hundreds of herself, an army of ragged soldiers with long jet-black hair, sunken brown eyes, and a prominently crooked nose. They wore dark green shirts with faded blue jeans and tattered black shoes. All of their uniforms were dirty and splotched with crimson blood. A single plain door disrupted the otherwise all-mirrored wall. A bright green exit sign hung above the frame. Was escape this close? Or was it another ruse from the clown? The massive beast was squeezing through the busted door behind her, and she grabbed for the knob. It didn't budge. She was almost unsurprised. A whistle, like the low humming of a car passing by. She ducked out of the way as the beast swung its sledgehammer into the nearby mirror. Shards of tinkering glass flew everywhere. Bits of the moon sprinkled onto her body. The clown faced her and snarled, angrily that it missed so inelegantly. She brandished her butcher's knife. The beast was unfazed. "Who are you?" the girl demanded. In response, the thing swung its hammer vertically. She sidestepped it, and the concrete cracked underneath the blow. Its moves were getting sluggish and labored. She held the knife out with both hands. "What do you want?" The clown turned its tree-trunk neck. "I want my prize." He struck again. She wasn't fast enough, and the handle glanced off her bum shoulder. Her sore arm screamed at her, but the adrenaline kept most of the pain at bay. She slashed with her knife, slicing a thin line in the beast's arm. The beast hissed, then it roared with rage. The next attack was sporadic, fueled by rampage rather than method. It missed wildly, and she took the opportunity to get in close and thrust the knife in its chest. The blade stuck into the padded jacket, but it never tasted flesh. The thing smacked the knife away and threw the girl across the room. Her back struck the far wall, and she fell. Her muscles were liquid, and they wouldn't respond. The beast trod forward, fixing its wild, ogling eyes underneath the mask on its prize, while the girl lay unmoving on her side. She felt an awkward bulge on her hip, and when her arm decided to start moving again, she felt something in her pocket. The beast came closer. She wrestled it out and felt along a familiar oblong shape. It was a switchblade. "Nice try, little pig," the thing growled, "but it ends here." It swung the hammer sideways, and the impact would have done enough damage to shatter her pelvis had the beast not slipped on a shard of glass. It stumbled, and the hammer kicked off her right shoe. She felt a small bone crack in her foot, but she was up before she felt the pain spread. She flicked the blade out from its cover and raised it up to the thing's head. It tried to lean back, but it was too late. The girl carved a deep, wide grin into the beast's neck, and the blade sliced it like hot butter. The thing screamed and dropped its precious hammer. It held its large, gloved paws to its neck, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. Dark blood spurted between its fingers like a water pump, and soon it collapsed on the ground. Its head hit heavily on the concrete, and the clown mask dislodged from its head, where the girl recognized its lumpy face. Staring back at her, with unfocused, dead eyes, was a face she knew too well, because it was one of the only faces she saw in this hideous place. It was her face. There was an unmistakable long, jet-black hair, sunken brown eyes, and crooked nose. There was no trick of the light, no illusion that she noticed, no seam along the open neckline. She had killed what uncannily looked like herself. That was when the torrential headache struck down on her. She crumpled into a pile of mushy flesh and aching bones, hardly able to keep her eyes open. The pain had developed little by little with each iteration, and this one was a doozy. Her forehead was being split open by burning claws, and magma poured into the gash. A single voice echoed through her head as she lay next to her doppelganger. "She'll die." The pain was subsiding. It persisted like a jackhammer right outside the window early in the morning. She forced her eyes to open. In the mirror, she saw a steady stream of blood run down from the middle of her forehead. It was the spot where the agony was located. Beyond her blurry stare, past her reflection, she saw an impossible sight. The clown beast had gotten up, and its face floated toward her. No, it wasn't the monster who approached. It was the mask itself. It had become untethered from its host and floated freely off the ground. The woman rotated and held her hands up in front of her face, anticipating an attack. But she noticed that the mask was still on the ground where it had fallen off the beast. She looked in the mirror again. The mask had floated up next to her and stared back. Its repulsive lips and hideous smile contorted into movement, and it started to speak. "You wretched thing," it said in a raspy voice. "I pity you." The woman could not conjure any words in response. Her tongue had been struck dumb. It rolled lazily in her slack-jawed mouth. "You have traveled through this hell," the mask said matter-of-factly. "You've faced endless nightmares in search of the truth, have you not? Haven't you chosen the path of truth and everlasting pain?" I didn't want any of this." The woman had found her tongue working again. "Seldom do," the mask said. "And yet you were able to take matters into your own hands, and by opposing means end them." It gestured to the fallen body. "Why kill this poor creature?" "I did what I could to survive," she said. "Yes, of course. But why fight so hard? What is the point of survival?" The woman swallowed hard. "I wanted to get out of this place." The mask tisked. Not quite. You may think you wanted to escape, but you really wanted to know the truth. Why you're here. Who you are. What is your purpose?" The woman crawled closer to the mirror like a beggar at the altar. Yes, that's what I want more than anything. Can you tell me where I am? Can you tell me my name?" The mask shook its face slowly, a bobbing fishhook in the deep blue waters. "Even I don't know that. But I know that this place was created by my beneficiary, and he's given me full rein to do what I want." The woman tensed. Tendrils of adrenaline had leaked away, and her body shivered with exhaustion and ache. She also shivered with newfound anger and anticipation. The mask went on. "He's given me playthings who wander down my halls. Some get lost, some go mad. Some are massacred indiscriminately. Some kill for sport. And some kill the big bad wolf at the end, and they slowly become what they once hated." The mask tilted its head and glowered at her. "You'll make a fine vessel." The woman looked with horror as her face in the mirror began to change. Her skin dripped off, and underneath her face was starchy white paint. Her features twisted into soulless painted eyes, a red nose, and a wide, toothy grin. The woman shrieked, "What is this? What are you doing to me?" "I will make you magnificent," said the mask. Her vision became red. She frantically looked around, and her gaze fell on the sledgehammer. The original clown mask lay discarded nearby, and a wild idea sprouted in her feverish mind. She picked up the hammer easily in one hand, guided by strength she didn't know she'd possessed. She swung it heavily, and it bashed the clown's mask on the floor. It cracked, but it did not yield completely. Several mirrors cracked along with the mask. The room and the mask were connected. Pain flared from her forehead, but she ignored it. Her rage fueled her more. "What are you doing?" The mask sounded alarmed. She swung again, and the mask gave in more. The mirrors looked like they were on the verge of disintegration. With one gentle touch, they could all shatter into stars. The woman felt like she was about to shatter as well. "Stop this!" The mask was hysterical. "You cannot change the convergence. It's already been decided." The woman brought the sledgehammer up one more time. A new figure in the mirror caught her eye. It was the reanimated corpse of the blue-shirted body. It stood in the mirror, clothes hanging off, withered skin and bone. Its wide gash in the neck smiled warmly at her, and it brought a finger to its lips. It was sending her off with a goodbye. She brought the hammer down for the killing blow. The mask crumpled and broke. All the mirrors blew outward. Bits of glass became fairies, and their wings glittering in the dying light. The floating mask disappeared with the shattered mirrors, its screams cut off like a line being snapped. Everything was broken. The doors, the lights, the ground. Even the entire facility was crumbling down into darkness. She felt like her head was broken, too. A gentle voice breezed along her ears, leaving her with one last soft apology. "I'm sorry," it said. She drifted into that haze for the third and final time, and this time she welcomed it like an old friend. I hope you enjoyed Underneath the Mask by author Jackson Barnard, as performed by yours truly. If you enjoyed the tales you've heard tonight, I'd like to remind you one last time that tonight's featured author can be found by visiting our website. Just visit simplyscarypodcast.com/Barnard. Once again, that's simplyscarypodcast.com/Barnard, spelled Barnard. You'll find yourself on JC's profile at creepypastastories.com, our horror fiction website. There you'll find ways to connect with him, learn a bit more about him, and get links to his other work, absolutely free. Check him out, and you won't be sorry you did. Thanks again for your support of this show and of tonight's featured author. Now, before we go, I'd also like to take a moment to thank you personally for joining me for this episode of Scary Stories Told in the Dark. If you enjoyed what you've heard on today's program, please take a moment to stop by our iTunes page or wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast and leave us a 5-star review and a kind word. It makes a huge difference and would mean a lot to us. If you'd like to hear a premium extended edition of tonight's and all of our other episodes featuring twice the terror, visit simplyscarypodcast.com today and click the Patrons link in the menu at the top of the screen. You'll find yourself at chillingtalesfordarknights.com, where you can purchase season passes for this podcast and our other quality storytelling programs. or become a patron for as little as $5 per month and get access to our entire audio archive dating back to 2012, all of it ad-free. If you happen to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you can follow and subscribe to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights there, where you'll get all of our latest updates and new releases and have the chance to interact with us each and every week. You can subscribe to me on YouTube as well at the Otis Jiry channel, where you'll find releases of my series, Horror Storytime, dating back to 2014. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram too. Just search for Otis Jiry. Until next week, stay spooky and get some sleep if you can. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Scary Stories Told in the Dark, a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcasts network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com today to learn more about our network and our other amazing storytelling programs. Tonight's program was hosted, and its featured stories performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. Selected stories have been adapted with the kind permission of their respective authors. Original music provided by Luke Hodgkinson and Jesse Cornett. Sound design and final mixing and mastering provided by executive producer and director Craig Groshek. Program's artwork and logo by David Romero. If you're looking for some fresh tales on a daily basis while waiting for the next podcast, check out my YouTube channel, the Otis Jiry channel, and my extensive collection of narrated tales there. Simply search on YouTube by my name and you'll find me. And don't forget to subscribe and press the bell notification icon to get my latest releases. Got a scary tale of your own that you'd like performed? I take submissions. Email it to me today at otis@simplyscarypodcast.com to have your terrifying tome considered for production in a future episode of this show. That's otis@simplyscarypodcast.com. If you've enjoyed what you heard on tonight's program and are joining us on your favorite podcast app, subscribe to us to be sure you never miss an episode, and leave a 5-star review and a comment. Your feedback means a lot to me. You can also follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and yours truly on Facebook to connect anytime and get the latest updates on this and other programs and my channel. If you're listening on the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights YouTube channel, do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon for ctfdn as well to get more spooky tales from me and the crew and another episode of this program each and every Wednesday. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button to tell us how we're doing and leave a kind word or a request. And don't forget to visit us at chillingtalesfordarknights.com and consider supporting the team by becoming a patron. In addition to helping us out, you'll get exclusive access to our audio archive and ad-free downloads of all your favorite stories, including those you've heard on this program. As for me, I'll be back next Wednesday with more terrifying tales to keep you up all night. But that's all right. Who needs sleep anyway?